PechaKucha is a Japanese word for chit-chat and is the name of a presentation format created in Japan in 2003 by Astrid Klein and Mark Dytham, two architects looking for a way people could share their work quickly and simply in public. Since then, the idea has spread to over 700 cities around the world. At every PechaKucha Night, creative thinkers come together and share their ideas with only 20 images shown for 20 seconds each. PechaKucha, a fast, fun format. Find a location, join the conversation.
Someone knows my name. Welcome to Friday Nights at the Parish Art Museum. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It means so much to us in these challenging times for all of us. My name is Chris Seifert. I am the interim director of the Parish Art Museum. Happy to report that next week our new director, Kelly Taxter, will start, and we all look forward to learning more about her vision and leadership as we go forward. My first call request is to just please make sure your cell phones are turned off. I want to personally thank all of the presenters. I have been where you are, and I know it can be a little nerve-wracking, but it's a lot of fun, and it's hard to keep up with the 20-second rule, but it's all good, and we have a good crowd tonight. I don't think anybody's going to be too unruly, right, everyone? And Friday nights here at the Parish Art Museum are made possible by a wonderful and very inspiring sponsor to us, the Bank of America. We also have additional support provided by our dear friends, Sandy and Stephen Pearlbinder. So thank you very much to them. As you're probably aware, PechaKucha, there's a lot of different ways that you hear it pronounced. These type of events and storytelling evenings are happening all over the world this week. They happen all year round, and I encourage you to, every now and again, check out their website. It's a unique presentation format, a real storytelling format, and we are not alone. As I mentioned this week, there are presentations in Brisbane, Lima, Miami, Panaji, India, and Dali, China. And that's just this week. Tonight's program is a slight departure from our traditional methods. Tonight, we are going to bring you 3 live presentations, followed by 3 presentations chosen from our archives. The 3 archived presentations are some of our more memorable and popular PechaKuchas, and we know this based on the number of views that they get on the PechaKucha.com website. So please check out their website. It's a great place to explore and experience some truly wonderful stories. But enough from me. Let's get started. I'd like to introduce my friend, Nishan Kazazian. I met Nishan when I was sitting in my office. I can't remember how long ago it was now. It must have been right around the early parts of the pandemic, I think. And Nishan came and was walking around the parish enjoying our great outdoors. I think the slides started. Thank you. And he's knocking on my window of my office. So you have to go say to somebody, hi to somebody when they're knocking on your window, right? And now he's become a great friend and a great participator in different things here at the Parish Art Museum. Nishan Kazazian is an artist and licensed architect, lives and works in Manhattan and East Hampton. His art is about expressiveness, resilience, endurance, transformation, and rejuvenation, all things I think we can connect with these days. His architecture engages with social, societal, environmental, and functional needs. Kazazian aims to transform and blend the boundaries of art and architecture to create an osmotic relationship between the 2 disciplines. A former Fulbright Fellow, he is a member of the American Institute of Architects and earned a master's degree in architecture from Columbia University, a master's in art and art education from Teachers College at Columbia University, and a bachelor's of fine arts with distinction from the American University of Beirut. Kazazian has been an invited critic, both in art and architecture circles at universities in the U.S. and abroad. His artwork is presented in galleries in the U.S. and abroad as well, and his architectural work is published in many, many magazines. Please welcome Nishan Kazazian.
Thank you, Chris. I would like to thank Jennifer Duque for inviting me to present here tonight at the parish, which I have always thought of as one of the great architectural spaces to experience art and their surroundings. I would like also to thank particularly Chris Seifert and Corinne Ernie. Thanks to Alicia Longwell and the entire staff for holding the museum together through these difficult times. And finally, I offer a heartfelt welcome to the new director, Kelly Taxter. I wish her great success in her new role. Since high school, both art and architecture have been my driving passion. Through my life, my work in both disciplines have been affected by personal experiences, history and cultures, family and community, interaction with my teachers, colleagues, mentors, and students, and living in the social and political environments in which I found myself. The ways in which all these come together are visible in what I call art and architecture synergy, from personal to universal. Thanks for coming. This artwork, 2017, is from my Conundrum series. The multi-layered spaces allow multiple interpretations. By breaking and putting pieces back together, they represent experiences of falling, rising, resilience, and personal transformation. Undergrad at the American University of Beirut, 1971. The real, its shadows and reflections have always intrigued me. They are open to multiple perceptions. The sculpture below of split form represents belonging and not belonging, being separate but also connected. New York, 80s. These artworks are experimentations with different materials. On the left, newspapers. On the right, foam core. These experiments and explorations led me to discover other materials to work with later on. I was breaking and putting things back together since my youth. Later, I surprisingly discovered the Japanese practice of kintsugi, repairing broken ceramics. By emphasizing the object's breaks, the repaired piece has more beauty and history than the original. 90s, single plane unfolding, generating new planes within the form, is interpreted ambiguously. Each possibility coexisting with the other creates a sense of puzzlement on how to experience the object and space, as in Japanese origami and Chinese kirigami. I call these pieces landfill dialogues, discarded objects wrapped in clay to create the impression of humanoid forms. Think of them as our trash, talking back to us about our excess and its effect on the environment. 80s and 90s, explorations in different mediums. The white construction box is of discarded pieces from SOM's architectural model shop, repurposed to become one of 16 artworks in my first one-man show in Nantucket called Iron Nerves Floating Altars. Photo installation juxtaposes East Hampton's Hook Pond with Native American images. I look at the pond, imagining its history and memories being communicated to the present through these fragmented forms, creating a dialogue with both nature and the past. How does my artworks nourish my architecture? I imagine this virtual aquarium 2009 in Beirut, Lebanon. Virtual because undersea cameras around the world send satellite imagery of sea life, which are then projected onto the solar panels which form its shell. Healing Center, Yerevan, Armenia, 2014. Modern structures integrated with historic architectural elements from Caucasian and Middle Eastern cultures, as well as remnants of archaeological elements. A consolidated central structure allows the surrounding area to preserve its natural habitat. Amphibian Concert Hall, 2017. The impact of waves and tides when touching the structure triggers sound and light response patterns, experienced both inside and outside of the structure. When this feature is turned off, regular performances occur without distractions. Alternative Zoo, 2019. Living in New York, we hear about global environmental changes. In this zoo, wildlife images from 5 continents project onto structures on Hudson. Images of melting glaciers are projected from the North Pole and Antarctica into the buildings. The zoo creates a global interactive involvement with wildlife throughout the world. New technologies provide experiences akin to conventional zoos, avoiding maintenance and animal cruelty. Holograms provide experiences of interacting with animals. Small House, East Hampton. My approach to the synergy of art and architecture integrates artworks as exterior and interior walls. Plexiglass sculptures become pergolas and railings. The goal is to blend expressiveness and functionality. Fanciful solutions to global environmental issues, erosion and energy usage. These artistic structures can serve as aesthetically satisfying erosion barriers and fantasy solar panels. As Freud put it, dreams are often most profound when they seem most crazy. Capricious settings are also adaptations of my handmade artworks to computer software. Beyond functioning as aesthetically satisfying environmental solutions, they are multifunctional spaces for play and contemplation, providing escape and fantasy. Shifting shadows and transparencies enable the viewers to see through the hidden other. These artworks reflect experiences of upheaval of personal and global turmoil. Yet, despite all that, the message is one of endurance, survival, rejuvenation, and celebration. Fragmented landscape. Invite viewers into collaborative interaction to create personalized experiences. They embrace paradox and defy categorization and labels. They are the young in the old, the feminine wrapped in masculine and vice versa, the wise wrapped in folly, strength wrapped in vulnerability. This pandemic changed how looked at things. The change in lifestyle and confinement profoundly reconfigured relationships. This example, summer 2020 East Hampton, illustrates how we walked around like a chicken with its head cut off while everything was upside down. This flag from my pandemic series is made of used and discarded rubber gloves I wore early in the pandemic. Clothespins hold them together. Just as in those early days, it felt like the social fabric was fraying and barely holding. Like the American dream, the work embodies resilience and optimism about the future, even when it feels like everything is falling to pieces. Hopefully, collective experience will bring us together, striving to global humanism, coexisting with nature and environment together. Thank you.
Thank you, Nishan. Where to begin? What resonated with me, I think, was sort of this one phrase that you had in there, nature and the past. It's a really wonderful way to kind of a poetic way to think about being separate but connected. And I also understand the idea of breaking things and putting them back together over time. I think that's really just right to the point. I really found, I wish you many more dreams of profoundness and craziness. We could talk for a long time together, couldn't we, Nishan? Okay. Lauren Ruiz is a research-based multimedia artist whose work addresses the role of ethics, labor, and scientific authority amidst ecological crises. Ruiz presented her research projects at the Latvian National Museum of Art, the University of Applied Arts Vienna, UC Santa Barbara, UC Berkeley, and the 2021 College Art Association Conference. Her work has been exhibited in the United States, Japan, Canada, the Czech Republic, and Cuba. Ruiz has been a resident artist at the Vermont Studio Center, Guerrilla Sciences Art Sci residency, and has upcoming residencies at the iPark Foundation Artist in Residence Program and the 2022 Santa Fe Art Institute Revolutionary Residency. You are going to be busy. Lauren Ruiz is currently a curatorial fellow at the Parrish Art Museum. I'm particularly delighted to have the pleasure of working with her. I first met her when she came in for her interviews, and it's been really, really wonderful ever since. Please welcome Lauren Ruiz.
Okay. Hi, everyone. First, I want to thank Corinne Ernie for inviting me to present tonight, as well as Chris, Jen, and Victor. I'm honored to both work with you and also to present here tonight. All right, let's do this. So tonight, I'm going to introduce some of my works that explore the complexities of institutional power and personal identity in the current ecological crisis. In my practice, I find myself asking these three essential questions. Where does nature begin and end? How do labor and class relate to climate change and sustainability? And by what criteria do we classify something as foreign or invasive? I'm going to begin with the plasticization clinic projects that were exhibited in 2018, first at Stony Brook University, and then on Governor's Island while I was an artist in residence at the Guerrilla Science Art Sci residency. These two speculative fiction-based installations began as an experimentation on the relationship between microplastics and the human body. I wanted to present a scenario in which we were working to evolve with the new toxic nature we are creating. And so I created a fictive medical corporation, the Genetic Laboratories of Evolutionary Investment, or simply GLEI, Inc., to explore the implications of this idea. Within the work, I, along with 3 other artists, performed as a laboratory technician, encouraging visitors to share their medical history, have their photo taken, and volunteer a sample of their saliva. The saliva was then tested for BPAs and HDPEs, which are toxicants commonly found in many single-use plastics. The lab technicians were also responsible for providing both factual and fictive information regarding plastic pollution and the effects on the human body, blurring the lines between the clinic as a medical pop-up and an art installation. Although the two clinics began as a commentary on ecological downfall and the effects on human biology, it developed into a forum to examine public trust in medical corporate authority and the willingness of the public to freely provide their image and biological fingerprint, and that of their families, to medical companies and fictive corporations alike. The interaction created a moment of digestion, an instance of understanding of the impact of plastic pollution, because it dealt directly with the personal and the biological effects that couldn't be denied. The aesthetic markers of the clinic, the medical posters featuring young blonde women doing yoga on paddleboards, the promotional video emphasizing wellness and a sustainable lifestyle, confront the role of wealth and race in environmental issues. Going forward, I expanded the work into the GLEI Inc. projects, which consists of the company website, commercials, billboards, and the GLEI Inc. at-home saliva toxicant test that can be purchased through gleiinc.com. The GLEI Inc. at-home saliva toxicant test extends the social impact of the two clinics and redeploys the structural mechanisms of at-home ancestry kits to problematize issues of identity, trust, and privacy while questioning the relationship between reason and compromise in proposed solutions to anthropogenic climate change. Participants of the work are encouraged to order the saliva toxicant test through the website and mail back the required information, their photo, medical history, and saliva to be tested and archived in the Glay Inc. research facility. Through satire and critique, the Glay Inc. promotional material further confronts the disparity between America's privileged and disadvantaged in regards to healthcare and wellness amidst environmental crisis, begging questions such as, what is sustainable? Who is sustainable? And who is sustain-able? Switching gears, I want to discuss worms. While researching microplastics, I read an article about the wax worm's ability to digest certain types of single-use plastics. This digestive oddity had been tested, and in certain instances posed a remedy for plastic pollution. It was just a discomforting thought. Why are we turning to non-human labor to solve man-made problems? From there, I started to consider other types of non-human labor, and in doing so, discovered that the common earthworm that we have here in the Northeast is actually an invasive species. 17th century settlers brought them to North America, but perhaps due to their productive role in agriculture, they were deemed non-native instead of invasive. Over the past few months, I've partnered with a soil specialist from the Cornell Cooperative Extension of Suffolk County to learn more about the soil health and agricultural practices of Long Island. Through this partnership and my own research, I began to reflect on how all these topics, invasion, nativeness, polluted and labored land, relate. I wanted to create works that captured the complex fluidity of being both the alien and the native, the organic and the synthetic. In thinking through this challenge, I was led to consider the role early photography played in constructing identity. Specifically, I was interested in the ways that the social technology of photography could endow appearances with non-visual meaning. By using conventions of early photographic portraiture, the work comments on the inherited erasure of identity, the assimilated image of the immigrant, as well as the formation of faux native identity by early invaders. And this is an image of the work recently exhibited at Marquee Projects in Bellport for their winter salon. And as I continue my investigation into land, soil health, and non-human labor, I'm currently laboring away on an installation that will be on exhibition at the Southampton Art Center this spring. Using the research I'm gathering from my collaboration with Cornell Cooperative, this installation will explore the agency of the non-human by forcing the viewer to confront the ground beneath them through a visual and auditory experience of the subterranean. So I hope to see some of you there to experience the work firsthand, and thank you all for having me.
Thank you, Lauren. For those of you who didn't catch it, I didn't catch it. The show at the Southampton Art Center opens the 17th of April, so just a short time away. I love the fact that you started this off with this notion of institutional power and identity. I thought of, it just triggered so many thoughts to me from the past 10 months, so thank you for bringing that back to my thinking. And I find the sort of factual and the fictive, I believe was a phrase that you used, also caught my attention. Another way to think about, again, a lot of the sort of context that we all find ourselves in. I would like to let you know that waxworms make very good bait. So if you are thinking about fishing, and there might actually be something there in terms of your research and creative practice. And I look forward to more of your complex fluidity, as you put it, and I hope we all seek a non-erasure of our identities. So thank you, Lauren. Okay, are we ready for the next? Hugh Patrick Brown, photojournalist. By the way, I first met Hugh Patrick Brown when I was over at the community boat shop in Amagansett, and every Saturday I try to find my way over there, and Hugh is often over there documenting all the amazing work of historic craft that's happening. Hugh spent a major part of his career at Time Life, shooting primarily for some small publications you may have heard of, Time and People, and occasionally for Fortune and Sports Illustrated. Brown's assignments took him around the globe to Vietnam, Northern Ireland, and the White House under the Nixon administration. Another friend through a mutual interest and joy in the history and craft of wooden boat building, as I mentioned, please welcome Hugh Brown.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Victor, for inviting me. It's an honor to present this, if I can do that. Okay, on that, let's go. I remember being very young, seeing, Life magazine and National Geographic mostly, and thinking that would be a nice thing to do. I had no idea how to do it, but I worked in the college newspaper, and it being the 60s, I then got drafted, and I found myself in Vietnam. I was an infantry officer, and for a year I was a platoon leader and then a company commander, and then it's time to go back to America. And I had 6 months to go, and I would be training the next group of people to come over there. I disapproved of that, as a lot of us did. So I got a job with an Army magazine, and I spent my last 6 months there. And I ran around the country. This is a story for the magazine. It's an American doctor teaching Vietnamese doctors how to perform surgery on a child. And I met a lot of journalists, and I got an invitation from Time. And so I separated from service there. And I show this because soldiers don't carry passports. And I got my passport in a place that doesn't exist. Sort of like Czechoslovakia doesn't exist today. This is from the embassy at Saigon in the Republic of Vietnam. There is no such place. Anyhow, went back to New York, started doing some stuff for Time. They were shutting Life magazine down then. I show this because this was mocked up to be a cover of Life magazine. And then Elizabeth Taylor turned 50 or something, and that was gone. But I was close. But we also, at that point, were starting People magazine, and I don't know if any of you can really remember it, but it's not like it was today. It was in black and white. It was started by Life magazine People, which means it was very photography-centric, and we could go spend weeks doing stories and stuff. And it was also Watergate, and for Watergate I went down and worked in the White House, but I did not like indoor work, and so I went to the editor at Time and I said, I want to go to Belfast. And this is Belfast in 1972. On and off, I stayed in Belfast for almost 3 years. I traveled to England and I went back to New York quite a bit. This is the funeral, there was at least 10,000 people there, of Joe McCann, who was shot down. He was an IRA fella. He was shot down in the markets by the Special Branch. As I say, about 10,000 people at Mountjoy Cemetery came to this, and probably about 5,000 British troops. And at that time, there was a thing called Bloody Sunday up in Derry. You might say Londonderry, we'd say Derry. And the paratroopers killed about 13 people in a riot. And so they cut the, they wouldn't let anybody go up there unless you were a resident. I like this. This is an artifact. I have press authorization to go into Bogside from your man, Duxie Doherty. He's your authentic man. He's sort of the PR guy for the Bogside Company of the Provisionals. Anyhow, after that, I met this fella in Belfast, and years later I saw him again. His name is Seamus Heaney. He's an Irish poet, and he won the Nobel, I think in '95. And Now he was teaching one semester a year at Harvard, and so I went up there to see him again. And then when I came back after that, I found I wanted to go back to Asia a lot. This is China in 1981. It was for Fortune magazine. And I look at these pictures now, and I could tell people, I think, that I covered the Boxer Rebellion, and I'm much younger or look very good for my age. This is Guangzhou, that's the Pearl River, Canton, in 1981. If you Google that now, Guangzhou, and look at it, it is a shining city. It looks much more modern than New York. This is 40 years ago. They've come a long way. It's amazing, maybe a little frightening. Anyhow, I went back then, and I went a lot of times to Asia. I got involved in bringing some Montagnard, the mountain people in Vietnam who fought with our special forces, and they got kicked out after the war, and they were in resettlement camps. We brought them back here to North Carolina. And then I was in New York, and a lot of stuff in New York, so I thought I'd show you a picture of some of the locals. Actually, Carly Simon is not a local, but there's Larry Rivers and Marisol, and that other fellow on the left there, I think he had a place in Montauk, so he counts as a local. Let me see, what do we have next? And I like boats, and I like sailing, and as Chris mentioned, when I came out here, a friend of mine that I sail with said I had to join this East End Classic Boat Society. And it was a good thing, too. I thought I'd become a carpenter, but that never happened. They needed a newsletter. They have a website. They have other things. And so I get to photograph, and Chris is often among them, of these handsome guys right here. And it sort of satisfies my compulsion to photograph people. Next one here is, come along. This is Don Schreiber. He's a great carpenter. He's been a carpenter all his life. He tried to teach me some carpentry. It really didn't take so much, but he's 92, and he's kind of amazing. And again, it satisfies my compulsion to do this. And the other thing I do, since I'm retired out here now, is I go to the beach in the morning, in the evening, at night, the summer and the winter. If anybody needs 500 or 600 pictures of the beaches, come see me. I have them for you. Anyhow, that's it. That's the winter. It's a classroom in light, the beach, as probably many of you know. And I feel very privileged to be able to come out here and do this all the time, or live here, actually. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. And thank you for not putting me in one of those photos from the boat shop. Much appreciated. But, well, just so it's so wonderful to hear your story and to kind of understand some of the arc or trajectory of your life and some of the experiences you've had. I know many of us read about or study or hear about these things, but to hear it from a first resource is really quite interesting. And also for opening up for us a little bit. I know at the boat shop I might think you were a little bit of a quiet guy, so now I know a little bit more about you, so thanks a lot. And I love this idea of the beach being a classroom in light. That's just a wonderful way to put it. And I wish you much more experiences in light and with people. And it clearly gives you joy. I like the photo of the early magazine where they have the sociobiology on top of that little lance. That actually brought me back to some thinking around what Lauren was talking about, and also Nishan. It's always incredible to me how the different presenters have so many crisscrossing kind of themes and connections. So thank you to all three of you. Congratulations, you did it. And now to the second half of our program this evening, where we're going to bring some presentations out of our archives. We sourced, or I should say, the curatorial team, Corinne and Jen and Victor, sourced some highly popular past presentations by John Mulhern, Sandy Haber Fifield, and Janet Culbertson. I will introduce the first presentation. The second two will have their own introductions built in. So let's get started with our first video presentation. From the archives, John Mulhern is originally from Maryland, right outside of DC. He received his BFA and his MFA MAT, another teaching degree, in painting and education from the Maryland Institute College of Art. After completing his education, Mulhern worked as a sculptor, painter, and educator in New York. In 2011, Mulhern moved his studio to the East End to continue his work as a professional artist, shop director, and art educator. He is a painter best known for his abstractions that contain intimate moments of detail with a large atmospheric landscape. At a glance, one can find an allegorical climax of dancing lines contrasted by bold colors and raw texture. They are gut paintings, each one with its very own personality and optimistic outlook through abstraction. These are not true landscapes or cityscapes or subjects. Rather, the work is founded in paint and ends in paint. Mulhern describes a space without giving away the full story. So please enjoy this, and as I said, the next two will just follow in time. Thank you.
My story starts off with a dyslexic boy in Maryland. I grew up in the metropolitan area of DC, as many of you have heard. I hopped on to get into a public high school art school, and then I got scholarships to RISD, Micah, Pratt, and a couple of schools, and I ended up in Baltimore because I fell in love with it. Moved to Brooklyn, and then I moved to the East End in 2011. My childhood was in between the forest and the subways. As a young man, my chores were retiling a bathroom or actually going outside and working on the deck. My mom would pull me out of school so I could go to a Van Gogh show at the National Art Gallery or go see James John Audubon, who I had an entire book of. I learned very quickly, if I could see it, I could do it. All I had to do was learn how to see. So that's where my story starts. I love how painting can change the image and make it its own. That's what paint does. Paint slowly became the reason for me making images, rather than the actual idea of observation. I learned that I love the notion of paint. A lot of art today is about making things bigger and louder and making you step back from the piece. My work is about bringing you forward, having an intimate conversation in color and texture. I want you to lean in and become a part of it. There's a jazz in painting. There's a music in it. There's a feeling through it. And I think my compositions can be explained really well through relating to music. If you look at the humming red in the background as it moves into the foreground, stepping forward, or the blue slowly fading away, the spark of that clear white dash and that clean movement, then that slow rhythm and undertones. It grows, and that sharp line of that little bit of calligraphy just to keep you waiting and holding on. Then it fades, and the painting within slowly comes out, and you hear that sound, yet the painting's silent. And that's where the art begins for me. You see, I try to inspire this in my students. I try to make it so if they see it, they can do it. My shop started out with just one welder. It started out with just one saw, and then it became a welding shop. It became several saws. It became 17 students. It started out with a figure sculpture, and then that figure sculpture became more. The thing is that I push my students to push beyond the level of high school. I expect them to create college work because they can do it. Their age isn't their limit. Their talent and knowledge isn't their limit. It's only them getting the guts to do it. Staring at a piece, being one with a piece, having a harmony, a student can build a Les Paul guitar handmade out of 4 pieces of wood. The first sculpture ever built in my student's studio was a 500-pound steel sculpture named Cubby. It can happen. I just have to inspire it within them. I have to feed that fire. And sometimes it takes that 2 in the morning waiting. And at 2 in the morning, us working in a shop, that's a hard day. Thank you, Jen, for letting that happen, my lovely wife. But that's where art happens. It happens those late hours. It happens alone in the studio. It happens when your hands hurt. It happens when your head is tired and You're alone and you're staring at your painting and you're just thinking it's not working, and suddenly that little dash comes. That little spark happens, and it pulls you forward, and you have figured out what you want to say. And then you build on that spark, and you build on that dash, and you take a chisel and you start carving away into the painting. You start pulling it forward, and it becomes something more. And hopefully you can keep that voice. I mean, Picasso did say that sometimes you have to get rid of the most beautiful part, and I hate doing that, since I paint for that eureka moment. That idea where one stroke turns you around. I love the lusciousness of paint. I love how it becomes its own body and its own texture. I love layering through my compositions. I never want to do the same painting twice, because that doesn't inspire me. I want to fail, and I think that's okay, because failure is growth in art. Because me actually having a hard painting is good for me. Sometimes it takes several of them, and that's okay, because that's what makes it real. When you work for it, you have to change your perspectives, and not all my paintings are the same. Sometimes they're from above, sometimes they're from below, sometimes they're more like a cityscape, sometimes they're more of a landscape. But it's always about those little intimate details, those conversations, those sparks in between, that hint at you understanding the space that I'm telling you about, but not giving you the full story, because it's your story, and you can turn it around for yourself. Sometimes it's about how little can go into a painting, how less can be more, how a dash can be a feather or a movement. Sometimes it's about capturing that burst with that little flutter of something moving behind you. Sometimes it's about an object, the essence of what something can be. I love the grit in work. I like my work to kind of have a little bit of dirt, a little bit of the real world in it, but then have that whimsical outlook. I like where the wires change in between. I like when the textures pull together and they push forward again. I like how color can change an object and make it come alive. Or you can take something broken and you can fix it through the yard sale finds my mom used to bring home and I used to play with. Part of this is you can really make a notion, you can have a conversation, you can have a spark, you can have those little vibrations of red, and it can be beautiful. And I love that. Sometimes it's a landscape. Sometimes it becomes a seascape. But in the end, it's always about paint for me. It's about that texture on that canvas, that flat surface becoming alive, and you leaning into it and grasping it, and you wanting to be a part of it. The average person looks at art for 3 seconds. I want you to look at it more. I want you to be a part of it. Sometimes it's about the dash of a brush, how quickly and confident a movement can be. How the little flex can pull you around and pull you back. How that little jotted line on the left can pull you to the right. And that little dash of red pulls you up to that center. It makes you look at that spark. Is that a flare? Is it a symbol? Is it a dash? Is it Native American face paint? What is it? I'm really thankful to be out on the East End. I've had Peter Marcel show me, I've had Sarah Nightingale show me, and I've been emerging for a couple of years. And through working with Ned Smythe or Jen Cross or the inspirations I've had, I've been really thankful to be able to actually say, as an East Ender, I love it here. Thanks.
Is Sandy Haber Fifield, I hope I pronounced that right, I'm sorry if I didn't, was born in Youngstown, Ohio, and lives on Shelter Island and in New York City. In 1981, she received her MFA in photography from the Rochester Institute of Technology, and soon thereafter was awarded the New York State CAPS grant. Using an array of techniques and stretching the traditional boundaries of the medium, Sandy's photographs explore the visual, psychological, and formal possibilities in creating composite pictures. Her work has been shown in numerous galleries and museums throughout the United States, including the Art Institute of Chicago, the De Cordova Museum, and the Museum of Modern Art. Sandy's photographs have been the subject of 3 monographs, and her work is represented by Yancey Richardson in New York and the Robert Klein Gallery in Boston. When not in her studio, Sandy can be found swimming off the beaches of Shelter Island or wherever she can find warm water. Sandy, we don't have any warm water right now, but we have a warm welcome for you.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you to the parish for inviting me this evening and to all of you for being here. I've been making photographs for about 40 years, and tonight I'm going to show you some of the cornerstones of my trajectory that have led to my current work entitled Lineations, which you see here. I've rarely been content with the photograph as a straightforward document of our world. My images, of course, are also my experiences, frozen, recorded, distilled. And I've always wanted to render the photograph's boundaries more pliable. I rip the margins off and create new ones. Edges that once existed melt, and with a few interventions, the medium hopefully blurs its record of the past to the reality of my present. While I care about the basic parameters of the medium, the frame and the shutter, it is instead the processing of visual material in our minds that has engaged me the most throughout these 40 years. The seeds of my visual vocabulary began in Rochester, New York in the late 70s, when a lot of experimentation was the norm. Photographers such as Robert Heineken, Robert Fichter, and Thomas Barrow were all playing with the frame, and their work was inspirational. They cut the film, they destroyed it, and generally manipulated it in a multitude of ways. Robert Fichter said, "I print everything the negative will carry. Dust, scratches, figure, images, philosophy, and oh boy, there's some kind of image here too." These photographers freed me, and I thought a lot about what happens when one picture is combined with another. Collisions and alignments are inevitable. This allowed me to remove myself from the concept of photography as fact. My earliest experimentation began with something that in a 20-something's hands today would likely be accomplished with the click of a few Photoshop tools. Instead, I laboriously combined these images as I shot them, writing down and remembering which image followed the next. The photographs seamlessly connect because I cut out the internal structure of the camera that creates the square or the rectangle, thus getting rid of the delineations between images on 2¼ inch film. I printed these in a massive 8 by 10 inch and larger, and the prints were washed and squeegeed in my New York City apartment bathtub. The dreamy or fantasy quality of the first two images that were made in Haiti and California became more specific when I moved to the studio to appropriate imagery from the television screen. Throughout the 80s, movies, commercials, and documentaries became fodder for my commentary on media and the bombardment of imagery in our culture. MTV was relatively new on the scene, and little kids were glued to Sesame Street. I used all of it, and of course, that bombardment is far more ubiquitous today. As the years progressed, the work continued to explore fractured ties between images that are made whole through free associative visual reasoning. The Gestalt psychology, one of the founders of Gestalt psychology, Kurt Kafka, said, "The whole is other than the sum of the parts." Gestalt is all about the fact that our brains are holistic, but it's the relationship between things which creates the wholeness. Our minds fill in where our eyes cannot see. In this 2006 image, I worked with a photograph from the Times of women in Afghanistan enjoying a sewing class. On the way to class, their teacher was killed. I've written my thoughts on acetate and sandwiched the images together. The torn fabric is a metaphor for the tearing apart of life, and to further illustrate the article are the speeding car and forever the light of hope. What do we focus on when we look? How do we create a visual narrative of the world to make sense of it? For me, the grid mimics my way of seeing in fragments that coalesce. The periphery becomes as meaningful as the object in front of me, and of course the eye itself is always moving. It cannot remain immobile when open. As the grid helps images coalesce, sometimes logic is blown apart and challenged by changing the expectation of ordered images. The empty spaces on the wall are as important as the images themselves. I think of them both as language, words, sentences, paragraphs that can be reused, re-examined, and reinterpreted. In 2011, my book After the Threshold was published. It was a new approach for me in that I adhered to a pictorial structure of 4 images printed on a single sheet. My interest in Gestalt continues with these pictures, and I feel strongly that if images can't be understood without language, then what are cameras for? The critic Vicki Goldberg said, "So what we are looking at in these photographs is often looking itself." I'm interested not just in the decisive moment, but many moments, the extension of the frame and what happens between them. When after the threshold was completed, I took a break from the camera and made drawings for about a year. Most of them landed on my studio floor, but something fresh was awakened. My body of work entitled Lineations, which you saw earlier, began in 2013, and in some fashion, it continues today. These pictures are relatively small, intimate assemblages using some combination of mixed media, vellum, and photographs. Lineations is less narrative than After the Threshold, but relates to my longstanding interest in the nature of perception. The images play with space and how we alter it in our minds. The architectonic and geometric qualities come directly from spaces in the natural world as well as the man-made. Part of this series was photographed in my kitchen over 2 summers, where the light cuts through the room and brings the outside in. The alterations for each piece are always driven by the photograph. Sometimes when I'm stuck, I'll draw to loosen up and try new ideas, but my starting point is always photographic. This image was a total fluke. I walked in the studio one morning and pieces from the day before were just sitting there. It was a gift, and I was lucky. But of course, making it happen again and again is always the challenge. I'd like to close with the next image from a new body of work, which has a working title of Gods and Demons. And this body of work was inspired by a trip I made about a year ago to Cambodia. Thank you so much.
As an eco-fest artist for over 50 years, Janet Cuthbertson paints. As an eco-feminist artist for over 50 years, Janet Cuthbertson paints the Earth's diverse features and landscapes. Traveling the world to in the collection of the National Museum of Women in the Arts in Washington, D.C. She is in New York. Congratulations. Janice currently lives and paints on Shelter Island. As an eco-feminist
Thank you for your patience. We are going to take it all apart and put it all back together, or just turn it off and turn it back on. We're going to just try to reset, and if you can just be patient with us for a few moments. Thank you. Technology's gotten the better of us this evening. We are going to wrap it up after 2 archived presentations. Thank you very much to everyone who stuck around and to everyone who's watching from afar. We'll be back with another PechaKucha in, when are we doing this again, Jen, in June? June 18th. And thank you again to our presenting sponsor, Bank of America, and our support from Sandy and Stephen Pearlbinder. Thank you everyone for coming out and staying online, and enjoy your weekends. Thank you.